Jasmine Crockett was a name that had been buzzing in political circles for quite some time. She wasn't your typical politician. She was bold, outspoken, and unafraid to speak her mind. People either loved her or hated her, but no one could deny the energy she brought to any room she walked into. Her social media game was strong too. She knew how to rally her supporters with fiery posts and sharp comebacks aimed at her critics. For someone like Jasmine, life moved fast and she thrived on the chaos of politics. But even someone as confident as Jasmine couldn't have predicted what was about to happen. It all started on a quiet afternoon when she was sitting in her office scrolling through Twitter while sipping coffee. The TV in the background was tuned to a popular news show where Kash Patel, a well-known investigator and former government official, was being interviewed. At first, Jasmine didn't pay much attention. She assumed it would be another boring segment about policy changes or election predictions. Boy, was she wrong. As the interview progressed, Kash began dropping bombshells. He calmly laid out evidence he claimed proved corruption involving people close to Jasmine. Emails, financial records, whistleblower testimonies. It was all there, presented in a way that made it hard to ignore. The host asked tough questions and Kash answered them without hesitation. His tone was calm, almost clinical, but the weight of his words hit like a ton of bricks. Jasmine froze as she listened. Her heart raced and her hands tightened around her coffee mug. "What is this nonsense?" she muttered under her breath. But deep down, she felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just some random accusation. It was detailed, specific, and public. And it was happening live on national television. The studio audience reacted audibly, gasping and murmuring among themselves. Some looked shocked, others intrigued. One thing was clear. Everyone was watching closely. Social media erupted within seconds. Hashtags related to Kash's claims started trending, and screenshots of the documents he shared flooded timelines. Reporters scrambled to verify the information, and pundits weighed in with their opinions. It was chaos, and Jasmine was right, in the middle of it. Back in her office, Jasmine's phone buzzed nonstop. Text messages, emails, and notifications poured in from every direction. Supporters were asking for clarification, opponents were gloating, and journalists were requesting statements. Her team gathered around her desk, whispering urgently about how to respond. They urged her to stay calm and avoid reacting impulsively. "We need a strategy," one of them said firmly. But Jasmine wasn't listening. Her blood was boiling, and her mind was racing with anger and frustration. She grabbed her phone and fired off a series of tweets denying everything Kash had said. "This is nothing but a baseless smear campaign," she wrote, tagging both Kash and the network airing the interview. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she typed furiously, determined to fight back. Each tweet was more aggressive than the last, filled with accusations of bias and lies. But instead of calming things down, her response only added fuel to the fire. By the end of the day, the story had taken on a life of its own. News outlets dissected every detail of Kash's allegations. Analysts debated their validity, and viewers formed strong opinions on both sides. For Jasmine, the nightmare was only beginning. What had started as a routine afternoon had spiraled into something far bigger and far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Little did she know, this was just the tip of the iceberg. The real battle was yet to come.
The fallout from Kash's explosive revelations was swift and relentless. By the next morning, Jasmine's face was plastered across every major news outlet. Headlines screamed accusations, and talk shows dissected her every move. Social media was ablaze with memes, hot takes, and heated debates.
Some defended her, calling Kash's claims a politically motivated witch hunt. Others were convinced she was guilty, pointing to the mounting evidence as proof. The court of public opinion had opened its doors, and Jasmine was on trial. That evening, Jasmine appeared on a primetime news program, determined to set the record straight.
She walked onto the set wearing a bold red suit, her signature look, exuding confidence despite the storm swirling around her. But as soon as the cameras rolled, it became clear that this wasn't going to be an easy fight. The host wasted no time diving into the heart of the matter, asking pointed questions about the documents Kash had presented. "Do you deny these allegations?" the host asked, holding up a printed copy of one of the financial records Kash had shared. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice steady but laced with defiance. "Absolutely. These are lies, plain and simple. Kash Patel is trying to destroy my reputation, because he knows I'm not afraid to stand up to corruption." Her answer sounded convincing enough at first glance, but the host pressed further. "Then why haven't you released your own records to disprove these claims? Wouldn't transparency help clear your name?" Jasmine hesitated for a split second, but she quickly recovered. "Because I shouldn't have to prove my innocence. I've done nothing wrong, and I refuse to dignify baseless attacks with endless explanations." The audience didn't seem entirely convinced. Murmurs rippled through the studio, and viewers at home began tweeting their reactions. Some praised Jasmine for standing her ground, while others accused her of dodging the question. As the segment wore on, the pressure mounted. Every time the host brought up another piece of evidence, Jasmine grew more visibly agitated. Her tone shifted from defensive to combative, and her words carried a sharp edge. "You're just parroting Kash Patel's lies," she snapped at one point, jabbing a finger toward the host. "You should be ashamed of yourself for giving him a platform to spread this garbage." The comment drew gasps from the audience and sparked immediate backlash online. Critics pounced, accusing her of losing her composure and attacking the messenger, instead of addressing the message. Supporters tried to rally behind her, arguing that she was being unfairly targeted, but even they couldn't ignore the growing cracks in her armor. Behind the scenes, things weren't much better. Jasmine's team huddled in a small green room after the interview, replaying clips of her performance on a laptop. One staffer groaned and buried his face in his hands. "We're losing control of the narrative," he muttered. Another chimed, "And she came off as defensive, not like the strong leader we need her to be." Jasmine paced back and forth, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. "They're twisting everything I say," she exclaimed, throwing her hands up in frustration. "It doesn't matter what I do or how many times I deny it, they'll keep coming after me." Her frustration was understandable, but it wasn't helping. The more she lashed out, the more ammunition she gave to her critics. Kash Patel, meanwhile, remained eerily calm. He continued making appearances on various shows, methodically breaking down the evidence against her. His demeanor was measured, almost professorial, which only made him appear more credible in contrast to Jasmine's fiery outbursts. To make matters worse, whispers of doubt began spreading within Jasmine's inner circle. A few close allies started questioning whether they'd been too quick to dismiss the allegations. One longtime supporter pulled her aside after a strategy meeting and said, "Look, I believe in you, but we need answers. If there's even a shred of truth to this, we have to deal with it before it gets worse." Jasmine shot back, "There's no truth to any of it. Kash is fabricating stories to take me down. You should know that by now." But her reassurances weren't enough to silence the growing unease. Loyalty, once rock solid, began to waver. Some staffers quietly updated their resumes, preparing for the possibility that this scandal might sink her career, and theirs along with it. As the days dragged on, Jasmine doubled down on her strategy of denial and deflection. She launched a full-scale PR blitz, appearing on podcasts, radio shows, and YouTube channels to push her side of the story. In each interview, she painted herself as the victim of a coordinated attack designed to silence her voice. She railed against deep state operatives and shadowy forces working behind the scenes to undermine her. At first, this approach seemed to resonate with her base. They ate up her fiery rhetoric, cheering her on as she battled what they saw as unfair persecution. But outside her loyal fan base, skepticism grew. Journalists dug deeper, uncovering inconsistencies in her timeline and raising new questions about her involvement in the alleged wrongdoing. One particularly damning report surfaced during this period, linking Jasmine to a series of suspicious transactions flagged by financial watchdogs. Though she dismissed the findings as irrelevant, the damage was done. The story dominated headlines for days, overshadowing any attempts she made to pivot the conversation back to her policy goals. By the end of the week, it was clear that Jasmine's efforts to contain the scandal were failing. Instead of quelling the fire, she had fanned the flames.
Public trust in her was eroding and her opponents smelled blood in the water. Kash Patel, ever the strategist, seized the opportunity to deliver another blow.
During an appearance on a late-night talk show, he addressed Jasmine's accusations head-on. "She can call me whatever she wants," he said with a faint smile. "But the facts speak for themselves. This isn't personal. It's about accountability."
If she has nothing to hide, she should welcome scrutiny, not run from it. The line became a rallying cry for those who doubted Jasmine's innocence. Clips of Kash's statement went viral, further amplifying the pressure on her. For Jasmine, the walls were closing in, and she had no idea how much worse things were about to get. As the days turned into weeks, the pressure on Jasmine only intensified. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, they did. Anonymous sources began leaking more documents to major news outlets, emails, bank statements, internal memos, all
pointing toward questionable activities involving people in her inner circle.
Each new leak added another layer of doubt, and soon it felt like the entire world was watching her every move, waiting for her to crack. The media frenzy reached a fever pitch. Every morning, Jasmine woke up to a fresh wave of headlines dissecting the latest revelations. Journalists camped outside her office, hounding her staff for comments. Reporters called her phone nonstop, leaving voicemails that she refused to listen to. Even her closest friends seemed hesitant to pick up when she called, afraid of being dragged into the chaos. It was as if the ground beneath her feet was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Her team scrambled to respond, but their efforts felt like trying to plug a dam with toothpicks. They issued carefully worded statements denying the allegations, but the public wasn't buying it anymore. People wanted answers, real answers, and Jasmine's blanket denials weren't cutting it. The more she pushed back, the more skeptical people became. Her fiery rhetoric, once her greatest strength, now came across as deflection. Critics accused her of hiding behind bluster instead of addressing the facts. Desperate to regain control of the narrative, Jasmine decided to hold a press conference. She rented out a large event space near her campaign headquarters and invited reporters from across the country. The room buzzed with anticipation as journalists took their seats, cameras rolling and notebooks ready. For hours leading up to the event, social media lit up with speculation about what she might say. Would she finally address the evidence head-on, or would she double down on her denials? When Jasmine stepped onto the stage, she looked every bit the picture of confidence. Dressed in a sharp black suit, her hair perfectly styled, she exuded authority. But anyone paying close attention could see the tension in her jaw, the slight tremble in her hands as she adjusted the microphone.
This wasn't just another speech, it was a fight for survival. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady but clipped. "I stand before you today not because I have something to prove, but because the truth deserves to be heard." For the next 20 minutes, she laid out her case. She denied any wrongdoing, calling the allegations a coordinated attack meant to silence her voice. She accused Kash Patel of cherry-picking information to paint a false narrative. She even went so far as to suggest that the leaks were part of a larger conspiracy involving political enemies who feared her growing influence. But then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. A veteran journalist in the front row raised his hand and asked the question that had been on everyone's mind. "If you're innocent, why haven't you released your own records to disprove these claims?" The room fell silent. All eyes were on Jasmine as she processed the question. For a brief second, her composure faltered. She blinked rapidly, her lips parting as if searching for words. Then, regaining her footing, she fired back. "Because I shouldn't have to. Innocent people don't owe anyone proof of their innocence. I've done nothing wrong, and I won't let myself be bullied into playing along with this charade." Her response drew mixed reactions. Some in the audience
nodded approvingly, clearly moved by her defiance.
Others exchanged skeptical glances, whispering among themselves. On social media, the clip of her answer went viral almost instantly, sparking heated debates. Supporters praised her for standing firm, while detractors argued that her refusal
to provide evidence only fueled suspicions. Things spiraled further out of control during the Q&A session. One reporter after another grilled her about specific details from the leaked documents. When pressed about a particular transaction linked to her name, Jasmine visibly bristled. "That's a private matter," she snapped, her voice rising. "And frankly, I'm tired of having my personal life dragged through the mud by people who don't care about the truth." Her frustration spilled over as the questions kept coming. At one point, she pointed a finger at a young journalist in the back and said, "You should be ashamed of yourself for perpetuating these lies. Do you even know what real journalism looks like anymore?" The comment drew gasps from the crowd and immediately became fodder for late-night comedians. By the time the press conference ended, Jasmine was exhausted, her face flushed, her voice hoarse. She walked off stage without taking any final questions. Backstage, her team gathered around
her, offering words of encouragement, but the mood was grim. They knew the damage had been done.
Clips of her angry outbursts dominated the evening news, overshadowing any attempts she made to defend herself. Kash Patel, ever the opportunist, seized the moment. That same evening, he appeared on a primetime news show, calmly dissecting Jasmine's performance. "It's simple," he said, leaning forward slightly. "If someone has nothing to hide, they welcome transparency. Instead, we're seeing avoidance, hostility, and baseless accusations. That tells you everything you need to know." His words struck a chord with viewers. Polls conducted in the days following the press conference showed a sharp decline in public trust for Jasmine. Once seen as a fearless advocate for change, she was now viewed by many as evasive and untrustworthy. Allies began distancing themselves, fearing guilt by association. Donors quietly pulled their support, leaving her campaign struggling to stay afloat. Behind closed doors, Jasmine tried to rally her team. "This is a test," she told them, pacing the room. "They want to break me, but I won't let them. We'll weather this storm together." Her words carried conviction, but there was a fragility beneath the surface. She knew the odds were stacked against her, and the weight of the situation was starting to show. One staffer, a loyal aide who had stood by her side since the beginning, finally spoke up. "We can't keep fighting like this," he said softly. "Every time we push back, it feels like we're digging ourselves deeper. Maybe it's time to consider a different approach." Jasmine stopped pacing and stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like she might listen. But then she shook her head, her resolve hardening. "No," she said firmly. "I didn't get this far by backing down, and I'm not about to start now." Her determination was admirable, but it also blinded her to the reality of the situation. The leaks kept coming, each one chipping away at her credibility. Her supporters dwindled, her critics multiplied, and the media circus showed no signs of slowing down. What had started as a battle for accountability had turned into a full-blown
war, one that Jasmine was losing piece by painful piece.
As the scandal continued to unfold, Jasmine's world began to crumble in ways she never thought possible. The cracks that had started as tiny fissures were now gaping holes, threatening to swallow her whole. Allies who had once stood by her side with unwavering loyalty began to distance themselves one by one. It was a slow and painful process, like watching a house of cards collapse piece by piece. The first major blow came when one of her closest advisors resigned publicly. This wasn't just any staffer. It was someone who had been with her from the very beginning, someone she trusted implicitly.
In their resignation letter, they wrote, "While I believe in her potential, I cannot stand by while she refuses to confront the truth. Accountability matters." The statement sent shockwaves through her camp. Supporters scrambled to interpret
its meaning, while critics seized on it as proof that even those closest to her doubted her innocence. The resignation marked a turning point. Other key figures in her circle followed suit, quietly stepping away or issuing vague statements about needing to reassess priorities. Some cited personal reasons, others simply disappeared without explanation. Donors, too, began pulling their financial backing. Campaign funds dwindled rapidly, leaving her team scrambling to keep operations afloat. Behind closed doors, there were tense meetings where voices were raised and tears were shed. Morale plummeted, and the once vibrant energy of her campaign felt more like a funeral procession. Jasmine tried to rally her remaining supporters, but it was clear that her influence was waning. On social media, hashtags mocking her went viral, overshadowing any positive content her team attempted to push out.
Memes depicting her angry outbursts flooded timelines, turning what should have been serious discussions into late-night comedy fodder.
Late-night talk show hosts couldn't resist poking fun at her press conference meltdown, replaying clips of her pointing fingers and shouting at reporters. Each joke stung a little more than the last, chipping away at whatever dignity she had left. Kash Patel, meanwhile, seemed unstoppable. He appeared on every major news network, calmly presenting new pieces of evidence and explaining them in a way that made sense to the average viewer. His demeanor was calm, almost professorial, which only added to his credibility. Viewers tuned in not just for the information he provided, but also for the stark contrast between him and Jasmine. Where she came across as defensive and erratic, he was composed and methodical. Clips of his interviews dominated social media, further amplifying his message. One particularly damaging revelation involved a suspicious transaction linked directly to Jasmine's account. Kash laid out the details during a live segment, showing screenshots of bank records and emails that painted an incriminating picture. "This isn't speculation," he said firmly. "These are facts. And until we see transparency, these questions will linger." The impact was immediate. Public trust in Jasmine hit rock bottom. Polls showed that even some of her most ardent supporters were starting to doubt her. Calls for accountability grew louder, with critics demanding independent investigations. Journalists dug deeper, uncovering inconsistencies in her timeline and raising new questions about her involvement in the alleged wrongdoing. Every day brought another headline, another accusation, another reason for people to turn against her. Isolated and desperate, Jasmine turned to conspiracy theories in an attempt to deflect blame. During a live stream on her social media page,
She claimed that Kash Patel was part of a coordinated effort to silence her because of her outspoken views. She accused shadowy forces of manipulating the media and using fake evidence to tarnish her reputation.
Her tone was frantic. Her words rushed as if she were grasping at straws. But instead of rallying her base, this strategy backfired spectacularly. Skeptics dismissed her claims as paranoia, while neutral observers questioned her judgment. Even some of her diehard supporters began to express concerns, wondering if she was losing touch with reality. Clips of her ranting about conspiracies went viral, further damaging her image. Critics mocked her for resorting to baseless accusations,
rather than addressing the mounting evidence against her. Her staff, already stretched thin, struggled to manage the fallout. They urged her to take a step back, to let cooler heads prevail, but Jasmine refused. She insisted on fighting back, no matter the cost. "If I back down now, they win," she told them, pacing the room like a caged animal. "I didn't get this far by giving up, and I'm not about to start now." But her defiance only dug her deeper into trouble. Each new accusation she denied, each new conspiracy theory she floated, only fueled the fire. The public grew weary of her excuses, and her approval ratings plummeted. Once seen as a rising star, she was now viewed as unstable and unfit for leadership. Pundits openly speculated about whether she would survive the scandal politically or personally. Behind the scenes, tensions within her team reached a breaking point. Arguments broke out over strategy, with some advocating for a full-throated defense and others pushing for damage control. One aide, visibly frustrated, snapped during a meeting, "We're losing. Can't you see that? No amount of denial is going to fix this." Another chimed in, "People don't care about speeches anymore, they want answers. Real answers." Jasmine listened silently, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. When the meeting ended, she retreated to her office, closing the door behind her. For hours, she sat alone, staring at the walls, replaying the events of the past few weeks in her mind. The weight of the situation pressed down on her heavier than ever before. She knew she was running out of options, but she couldn't bring herself to admit defeat. Outside, the storm raged on. Reporters continued, hounding her staff for comments while opponents gleefully predicted her downfall.
Social media remained ablaze with criticism, memes, and calls for accountability. Kash Patel, ever the strategist, kept releasing new pieces of evidence, keeping the pressure on. The narrative was spiraling completely out of her control, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. For Jasmine, the realization was both terrifying and humbling. She had always prided herself on being untouchable, on standing tall in the face of adversity. But now, for the first time, she found herself
questioning whether she could actually weather this storm, or if it was finally time to face the music.
The moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived, a live head-to-head debate between Jasmine and Kash Patel. It was supposed to be the ultimate showdown, the chance for both sides to present their cases directly to the public. For weeks, anticipation had been building. Social media buzzed with predictions, memes, and heated arguments about who would come out on top. Supporters of both parties were glued to their screens, ready to cheer or jeer, depending on how things unfolded. The event took place in a large studio filled with cameras, bright lights, and an audience brimming with excitement. The atmosphere
was electric, almost palpable as the two figures walked onto the stage from opposite sides. Jasmine wore a sleek navy blue suit, her signature confidence masking the turmoil she must have felt inside.
Kash, on the other hand, looked calm and composed in a simple gray blazer, his demeanor radiating quiet assurance. As they took their seats, the moderator introduced them and laid out the ground rules. Then, without further ado, the debate began. From the very first question, it was clear this wasn't going to be a typical political discussion. The moderator wasted no time diving into the heart of the matter. Kash, you've accused Jasmine of being involved in unethical behavior based on documents you've presented. Can you explain your findings? Kash leaned forward slightly, speaking in a measured tone. He methodically walked through the timeline of events, citing emails, financial records, and whistleblower testimonies that backed up his claims. His presentation was clinical, yet compelling, leaving little room for ambiguity.
When he finished, the audience erupted into murmurs of disbelief, many visibly shaken by the weight of the evidence. Then came Jasmine's turn to respond. She sat upright, gripping the edges of the table as if steadying herself. Her voice started, strong, laced with defiance.
"This is nothing more than a smear campaign designed to silence me," she declared, pointing a finger at Kash. "These so-called documents are fake, fabricated to tarnish my reputation." But instead of addressing the specifics of Kash's allegations, Jasmine launched into a tirade about bias and corruption within the system. She accused Kash of having ulterior motives, painting him as a pawn in a larger conspiracy against her.
Her words were passionate, even fiery, but they lacked substance. Each accusation she hurled seemed to raise more questions than answers. The moderator pressed her again. "You mentioned these documents are fake. Do you have evidence to refute them? Have you conducted your own investigation?" Jasmine hesitated, her composure faltering for just a fraction of a second. "I shouldn't have to prove my innocence," she shot back, her voice rising. "Why should I dignify baseless attacks with endless explanations?" Her response drew audible gasps from the audience. Some viewers nodded sympathetically, agreeing that innocent people shouldn't have to constantly defend themselves. Others exchanged skeptical glances, whispering among themselves. On social media, reactions poured in instantly. Clips of her reply went viral, sparking debates about accountability versus presumption of innocence. As the debate continued, Kash remained unflappable. He responded to each of Jasmine's accusations with calm precision, often referencing additional evidence to support his points. At one point, he held up a printed copy of a bank statement linked to her name. "If there's nothing to hide, why not release your own records to clear the air?" he asked, his tone polite but firm. Jasmine's face flushed red. She leaned closer to the microphone, her voice trembling with emotion.
"Because I won't play along with this witch hunt. You think showing fake papers makes you credible? You're nothing but a puppet for those who fear change." The comment drew mixed reactions. Some in the audience clapped enthusiastically, cheering her boldness. Others shook their heads, muttering under their breath. Critics online seized on the moment, accusing her of deflecting rather than addressing the core issues. Memes mocking her meltdown during the press conference resurfaced, reminding viewers of her previous outbursts. Things reached a breaking point when the moderator posed a particularly pointed question. A recent report highlighted a suspicious transaction tied to your account. Can you explain what that money was for? Jasmine froze, her eyes narrowing as she processed the question. For a brief moment, the room fell silent. Then, with barely contained fury, she snapped. You think you're so smart, don't you? Asking these ridiculous questions like you know anything about my life. Her voice grew louder, echoing through the studio. You're just another tool for the elites who want to shut me down. The audience gasped audibly. Cameras captured every second of her meltdown, zooming in on her flushed cheeks and clenched fists. The moderator tried to interject, attempting to steer the conversation back on track, but Jasmine wouldn't stop. She ranted for several minutes, accusing the moderator, Kash, and the entire system of conspiring against her. When she finally paused for breath, the damage was done.
Kash sat quietly, his expression unreadable, letting her words hang in the air. Without saying a word, he had made his point. The contrast between his composure and her volatility couldn't have been starker. By the end of the debate, the verdict was clear, at least in the court of public opinion. Clips of Jasmine's angry outbursts dominated social media, replayed endlessly across news channels. Late-night comedians had a field day, turning her meltdown into punchlines. Pundits weighed in dissecting her performance and declaring it a disaster. Even some of her most loyal supporters privately admitted that she had lost control. Backstage, Jasmine's team gathered around her, their faces pale with worry. One aide whispered urgently, "We need to issue a statement, something to soften
the blow." Another suggested canceling upcoming appearances, fearing further damage, but Jasmine refused to listen. Still fuming, she paced the room, muttering angrily about how everyone was ganging up on her. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "They'll never stop coming after me. This isn't about facts, it's about power." Her words carried a mix of frustration and resignation, as though she knew deep down that the tide had turned against her. But pride, or perhaps stubbornness, kept her from backing down. Instead, she vowed to fight harder, doubling down on her narrative of persecution. Meanwhile, Kash Patel basked in the aftermath of the debate. Interviews poured in, praising him for his calm demeanor and meticulous presentation. Clips of him dismantling Jasmine's arguments went viral, solidifying his reputation as a credible investigator. Supporters hailed him as a champion of transparency, while critics scrambled to find ways to discredit him, though few succeeded. For Jasmine, the fallout was catastrophic.
Calls for accountability grew louder, with some demanding independent investigations or even legal action. Journalists dug deeper, uncovering new details that only added fuel to the fire. Her approval ratings plummeted to record lows, and key endorsements evaporated overnight. Allies who had once stood by her side now distanced themselves, unwilling to risk association with someone whose credibility was in tatters. It was a devastating blow, one that left Jasmine isolated and vulnerable. The woman who had once commanded rooms with her charisma and confidence now found herself fighting to hold on to whatever scraps of dignity remained. And as the dust settled, it became painfully clear. This scandal wasn't just damaging her career, it was reshaping her legacy forever. In the days following the disastrous debate, Jasmine seemed to vanish from public view. Her once buzzing social media accounts went silent, her campaign offices emptied out, and reporters who had been chasing her for weeks found themselves staring at locked doors. It was as if she had retreated into a cocoon of isolation, trying to shield herself from the storm raging outside. But the world didn't stop spinning just because she stepped back. If anything, the absence only fueled more speculation. Rumors swirled about what Jasmine was doing behind closed doors. Some said she was holed up in her home, reevaluating her strategy. Others claimed she was consulting lawyers, preparing for potential legal battles. A few whispered that she might be considering stepping away from politics altogether. Whatever.
The truth, one thing was clear. The woman who had once thrived on chaos now seemed overwhelmed by it. For Kash Patel, however, life moved forward with momentum. The debate had catapulted him into the national spotlight, cementing his status as a household name. Media appearances came flooding in, and he used every opportunity to advocate for greater accountability in government. His calm, methodical approach resonated with audiences tired of political drama, earning him praise from both sides of the aisle. He even announced plans to write a book detailing his investigation into the scandal, promising readers an inside look at how he uncovered the evidence that shook Jasmine's world. The book deal sparked another wave of interest in the story, reigniting debates about transparency, ethics, and the role of power in politics. Clips of Kash discussing his findings dominated news cycles, while excerpts from the upcoming book leaked online, fueling anticipation. For many, Kash became a symbol of integrity, a rare figure willing to stand up to corruption, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Jasmine's silence spoke volumes. When she finally resurfaced weeks later, it wasn't with the fiery defiance people had come to expect. Instead, she appeared in a pre-recorded video posted to her social media channels. Dressed, casually sitting alone in what looked like a cozy living room, she spoke softly, almost hesitantly. Gone was the bravado. In its place was a tone of quiet reflection. "I've made mistakes," she admitted, her voice tinged with emotion. "I'm not perfect, and I never claim to be, but I want to learn from this experience and grow. Moving forward, I'll focus on rebuilding trust, not just with my supporters, but with everyone who believes in holding leaders accountable." Her apology was vague, lacking specifics about the allegations or any concrete steps she planned to take. Critics immediately pounced, accusing her of offering platitudes instead of real accountability. Supporters, however, clung to her words, hoping they signaled a turning point. For them, this was the Jasmine they wanted to believe in, a fighter,
willing to rise after falling. But the road to redemption wouldn't be easy. Public opinion had shifted dramatically, and trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild. Polls showed that while some still admired her resilience, most viewed
her as damaged goods. Calls for investigations continued, and journalists remained relentless in their pursuit of answers. Every time a new detail emerged, it felt like salt being rubbed into an open wound. Jasmine tried to claw her way back into relevance, making low-key appearances on podcasts and local news shows. She avoided confrontational interviews, opting instead for softer platforms where she could share her side of the story without facing tough questions. Her team worked tirelessly to reshape her image, emphasizing themes of growth and humility. They launched a grassroots campaign aimed at reconnecting with voters, focusing on issues rather than personalities. It was a risky gamble, but it paid off in small ways. Slowly, she began rebuilding her base, one person at a time. Town hall meetings drew modest crowds, and volunteers returned to help with outreach efforts. While she was far from the powerhouse she'd once been, there were glimmers of hope, a reminder that even in defeat, resilience can spark change. Kash Patel, meanwhile, continued to ride the wave of success. His book debuted at the top of bestseller lists, praised for its gripping storytelling and eye-opening revelations. He embarked on a nationwide tour, speaking to packed auditoriums eager to hear his insights. Along the way, he became a sought-after
commentator, often invited to weigh in on other high-profile scandals.
For Kash, the Jasmine saga wasn't just a personal victory. It was proof that persistence pays off. As months passed, the scandal faded from headlines, replaced by newer controversies and breaking news. But its impact lingered, shaping conversations
about ethics and accountability long after the dust settled. For Jasmine, it served as a painful lesson about the dangers of hubris and the importance of owning up to mistakes. For Kash, it reinforced his belief in the power of truth to cut through noise and lies. In the end, the story of Jasmine and Kash wasn't just about two individuals. It was about the broader forces at play in the world of politics. It highlighted the tension between charisma and credibility, between boldness and responsibility. And while their paths diverged dramatically, both emerged forever changed by the events that unfolded. For Jasmine, the journey was far from over.
Though her reputation had taken a hit, she refused to disappear completely. Whether she could fully recover remained uncertain, but one thing was undeniable. She wasn't ready to give up. As she told a small group of supporters during a recent event, "This isn't the end, it's just the beginning of a new chapter." And for Kash, the battle against corruption had only just begun. With newfound influence and a platform to
amplify his message, he vowed to keep fighting for transparency and justice. Accountability matters, he reminded audiences during a keynote speech. Without it, we lose sight of what truly matters, serving the people. In the grand tapestry of politics, stories like this are all too common.
Leaders rise and fall, scandals erupt and fade, and lessons are learned or ignored. What sets Jasmine and Kash apart is how their clash resonated beyond the headlines, sparking conversations that will echo for years to come. Their story serves as a reminder that in the pursuit of power, integrity is non-negotiable, and that sometimes the truth has a way of finding its way to the surface, no matter how buried it may seem.